You're sitting in your car outside a grocery store staring at the total on the self-checkout screen like it personally offended you. Eggs, chicken, toothpaste, coffee. Somehow it's $147.36. You move two things into the maybe later pile even though you actually need both of them, then tap your banking app before sliding your card because you need to know exactly how much room you have left before rent clears tomorrow morning. Your phone buzzes with a group text about someone's birthday dinner downtown, and before you even open it, you're already building an excuse in your head. Then a weird thought hits you. If you're almost 40 and still doing this math every week, what number were you actually supposed to hit by now? Because the stress isn't just the money, it's the constant calculation. It's opening the fridge and mentally converting groceries into hours worked. It's the tiny panic spike every time your car makes a new sound. It's pretending you didn't see the dentist reminder because you already know the answer is maybe next month. Sound familiar? You start treating normal life like a series of financial ambushes. A friend asks if you want to split an Airbnb for a weekend trip and suddenly you're studying cancellation policies like a lawyer. Your boss schedules a meeting for Friday afternoon and your stomach drops because if this job disappeared, you honestly don't know how long you'd stay afloat. Then there's the worst part. Watching people your age talk casually about investments, properties, or early retirement while you're still trying to stabilize basic cash flow. And after a while, the problem stops feeling temporary, it starts feeling structural. Like you're pushing a boulder uphill every month, and every time you almost get momentum, one unexpected expense sends the whole thing rolling back down again. Most financial advice responds to this by throwing gigantic numbers at you. You should have $1 million by 40? 2 million if you live in a major city. Save harder, invest earlier, skip lattes, max every account. And honestly, that advice usually makes people feel worse, not better. Because the real question isn't what's the biggest number possible, it's what's the minimum number where your life actually changes. That's different. And according to the data, the answer is probably far lower than you think, but also way more psychologically important than almost anyone realizes. Because the net worth that matters before 40 has less to do with luxury and more to do with leverage. Once you see the threshold correctly, the entire game changes. According to Federal Reserve data, the median net worth for Americans between ages 35 and 44 is $135,300, not $1 million, not even close. And before you dismiss that as depressing, think about what it actually means. Half of people entering their 40s have less than that. Much less in many cases. You probably know someone who looks financially stable from the outside but is quietly one emergency away from panic. That's the first thing most people completely miss. Net worth is invisible now. Back in the 1980s, wealth had clearer signals. Bigger house, nicer car, better neighborhood. Today, debt can imitate wealth almost perfectly for years. According to Experian's Consumer Debt Study, the average American carries $104,215 in total debt, including mortgages, auto loans, credit cards, and student loans. Which means two people can wear the same clothes, drive the same SUV, post the same vacation photos, and have completely opposite financial realities. One of them owns their life, the other rents it from the bank every month. And this is where things get really practical. Because before you even talk about investing returns or retirement accounts, there's a much more important threshold hiding underneath all of this. Optionality. The real purpose of net worth before 40 is buying options, the ability to leave a toxic job without immediate collapse, the ability to survive 6 bad months without your nervous system catching fire, the ability to make decisions based on long-term outcomes instead of immediate survival. That changes everything about how you move through the world. According to Vanguard's research on household financial behavior, people with emergency savings equivalent to just 3 to 6 months of expenses reported dramatically lower financial stress and made fewer impulsive borrowing decisions during downturns. Not because they were rich, because they had breathing room. That breathing room matters more than people understand. Think about the last time your checking account got low. Your entire personality changed for a week. You drove differently, answered texts differently. This is what psychologists call scarcity mindset, when lack of resources consumes so much mental bandwidth that your decision-making quality actually declines. Your brain narrows, your patience shrinks, your future disappears. You stop thinking strategically, you start thinking tactically. And that's why the right net worth before 40 is less about status than stabilization. Now here's the part that will blow your mind. Thomas Stanley, the researcher behind The Millionaire Next Door, spent decades studying actual millionaires, not influencers pretending to be rich, real millionaires. One of the most consistent findings wasn't income, it was restraint. Many lived in smaller homes than expected, drove used cars, and avoided status spending almost obsessively. Read that again. Because most people assume wealth creates luxury spending when the reality is often the reverse. Luxury spending delays wealth. There's a story Stanley told about two men living in the same upscale neighborhood in Texas. One was a flashy luxury car dealer with a massive house and constant visible spending. The other was a quiet engineer named Theodore Johnson who wore cheap suits, drove practical cars, and invested consistently for decades. Johnson eventually donated over $70 million to educational causes. Same country, same era. Completely opposite relationship with money. And here's the uncomfortable part. The flashy guy looked richer almost the entire time. This took me a long time to internalize, honestly, because like most people, you grow up unconsciously assuming visible spending equals success. It feels true emotionally, even when the math is screaming otherwise. But here's something nobody talks about. Lifestyle inflation is usually irreversible. When your rent rises, your car payment rises, your social expectations rise, your financial floor rises with them. The mortgage sets your floor rises with them. The neighborhood sets your pressure. The square footage sets your obligations. And suddenly your freedom gets expensive. According to a 2024 study from PIMNTS Intelligence, nearly 61% of Americans earning over $100,000 still reported living paycheck to paycheck. That sounds impossible until you realize income doesn't automatically reduce pressure as spending expands at the same speed. You've probably seen this happen in real time. Someone gets a raise, upgrades apartments, finances a nicer car, starts flying more, eating out more, buying better clothes, and somehow ends up feeling just as trapped as before. The boulder got heavier, not lighter. And this is where things get really interesting, because the people who quietly build serious net worth before 40 often look weird in the middle years. Their friends think they're underspending. Their families wonder why they're being so cheap. They delay upgrades they could technically afford because they understand a brutal truth most people avoid. Every recurring expense becomes a permanent employee you have to work to support. That $740 car payment isn't just $740, it's future labor. It's meetings you can't skip. It's jobs you can't leave. It's stress you have to finance every month. Once you start seeing purchases as future obligations instead of present rewards, your behavior changes fast. Now let's talk about something that will probably surprise you. The actual number you should aim for before 40 depends less on retirement formulas and more on income independence ratios. Here's what actually happens. Once your invested assets reach roughly 2 to 4 times your annual spending, your life starts changing psychologically even if you're nowhere near retirement. If you spend $60,000 annually and have $180,000 to $220,000 net worth invested intelligently, you are no longer operating from pure survival. You have resistance, you have time, you have negotiating power. According to Fidelity's long-term retirement benchmarks, they suggest having approximately 3 times your salary saved by age 40. But even that number misses the emotional transformation happening underneath the spreadsheet. The important shift isn't retirement readiness. It's reduced desperation. And desperation is expensive. Desperate people overstay in bad jobs. Desperate people tolerate abusive bosses. Desperate people finance emergencies on credit cards at 28% interest because there's no buffer between them and disaster. But here's the part nobody talks about. Once you stop operating from desperation, your earning potential often rises. Because changes negotiation. There's a famous example involving Ronald Reed, a gas station attendant and janitor from Vermont who accumulated an $8 million fortune before his death. He wore flannel shirts, repaired his own items, and invested steadily into dividend-paying companies for decades. People around him thought he was ordinary. Financially, he was compounding at a level most high earners never reach. And contrast that with countless high-income professionals trapped in what economists call the hedonic treadmill, the tendency for increased income to rapidly become emotionally normal, forcing people to chase bigger and bigger upgrades just to feel the same satisfaction. Bigger salary, bigger house, bigger payment, same anxiety, the treadmill speeds up, you stay in place, and this connects to something deeper about turning 40 specifically. Because before 30, most people still feel like they're figuring it out. Financial instability feels temporary, socially acceptable even. But approaching 40 changes the emotional math. Your peers diverge hard around this age. Some people start experiencing compounding. Others start experiencing accumulation of mistakes. One group owns assets. The other group owns payments. That gap widens quietly for years before suddenly becoming impossible to ignore. According to Dalbar's annual investor behavior study, the average investor dramatically underperforms the broader market, largely because of emotional decisions, panic selling, performance chasing, constant reacting. The market itself historically compounds around 10% annually over long periods. Human emotion destroys much of that return, which means the hardest part of building net worth before 40 usually isn't intelligence. It's emotional stability. You don't need genius-level investing skill. You need consistency during boring months, ugly months, uncertain months. You need the ability to keep buying when headlines look terrifying and your coworkers suddenly become economic experts during lunch breaks. Think about someone in your life who always seems calm around money. Not flashy, not loud, just stable. There's usually something underneath that feeling. They've created margin. Margin changes your posture toward life. Your car could break down. Your laptop might die. You could lose your job. None of it becomes instantly catastrophic. And this is where things get really practical again. Because when people hear build net worth, they often imagine complicated investing strategies when the highest leverage moves are usually painfully basic. Lower fixed expenses, increase automated investing, avoid catastrophic debt. That's most of the game. According to research from the National Bureau of Economic Research, savings rates matter dramatically more than investment selection during early wealth-building years. In plain English, how much you keep matters more initially than whether you pick the perfect stock. But emotionally simple feels unsatisfying. People want complexity because complexity feels sophisticated. Meanwhile, the boring person automatically investing 18% of their paycheck into index funds for 15 years quietly becomes financially independent while everyone else debates market timing on social media. Now here's the part that will blow your mind. A person earning $72,400 annually while saving 22% can easily outbuild someone earning $148,000 while saving 4%. Not theoretically, mathematically. Because wealth is not built from income alone. It's built from the gap between ego and spending, and you can actually feel this difference in daily life before it appears on paper. The financially stable person sleeps differently. They handle inconvenience differently. They don't spiral every time an unexpected bill appears because their entire life is imbalanced on a knife edge. That's the real flex. Not visible consumption, invisible resilience. But here's something most people completely miss. Your 40s are expensive in ways your 20s aren't. Parents age, kids get costly. Health issues appear, layoffs hit differently because employers start valuing younger, cheaper labor in many industries. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average duration of unemployment rises significantly with age after 45. That means financial fragility becomes more dangerous over time, not less. Which is why the net worth target before 40 matters so much psychologically. It's less about impressing anyone and more about entering the second half of adulthood with a foundation instead of a balancing act. And here's where the metaphor changes. Most people think wealth feels like acceleration, like life suddenly speeding up into luxury and freedom. Usually it feels like friction disappearing. The hill gets less steep. The boulder gets lighter. You stop needing perfect months just to survive. Now let's talk about the objection that's probably forming in your head. Maybe you're thinking, cool, but I'm nowhere near these numbers. I'm behind already. And honestly, a lot of people are. Wage stagnation is real. Housing costs are brutal. Student debt reshaped entire generations. Pretending otherwise would be ridiculous. But the mistake is assuming net worth only matters once it becomes impressive. It matters the second it becomes directional. If you have $1,200 saved, you're less fragile than you were at zero. If you eliminate one high-interest credit card, your future cash flow changes permanently. If you automate even $43 a week into investments, you begin building evidence that your life is no longer purely reactive. The goal isn't pretending tiny steps are huge wins. It's recognizing that stability compounds long before wealth does. And the deepest part of this has almost nothing to do with money. Because the real reason people obsess over net worth before 40 isn't greed. It's fear. Fear that their life choices are hardening into permanence. Fear that they waited too long. Fear that everyone else secretly understands money better than they do. But here's what actually separates financially stable adults from financially unstable ones most of the time. It's not brilliance. It's not even income. It's whether they built a life with enough margin to absorb reality. Reality is expensive. Cars fail at bad times. Companies downsize unexpectedly. Relationships end. Parents need help. Bodies change. And if every dollar you earn is already spoken for before it arrives, life starts feeling less like freedom and more like hostage negotiation. The strange thing is that once you finally build enough net worth to breathe, you often stop craving the things you thought wealth was supposed to buy. The anxiety reduction becomes more valuable than status. The ability to say no becomes more valuable than looking successful. Researchers call this counter-signaling when people with genuine security stop needing to visibly advertise it. That's why the people who are truly financially stable by 40 often live surprisingly normal. They're not performing wealth. They're protected from panic. And once you understand that, you stop chasing a number just because it sounds impressive. You start building a life where bad luck doesn't instantly become disaster, where your choices belong to you again, and where money finally becomes quiet enough for you to hear your own thoughts.